She thought her badge gave her the power to judge, convict, and humiliate anyone she chose. But when senior flight attendant Beatrice Holloway decided to target a young black girl sitting in first class, accusing her of theft and fraud, she made a fatal calculation. Beatrice was so blinded by prejudice that she didn't realize the girl she was harassing wasn't just a passenger. She was the daughter of the man who owned the entire airline. You need to watch until the very end to see the moment the CEO steps onto the plane and the look of absolute terror on Beatrice's face when her career crumbles in seconds. This is the ultimate story of instant karma. The early morning sun glared off the tarmac at JFK International Airport, baking the asphalt even before the clock hit 8 a.m. Inside the cool, pressurized cabin of Horizon Air Flight 492, bound for London Heathrow, the air smelled of sanitized wipes and expensive leather. Beatrice Holloway stood at the entrance of the first-class cabin, her uniform pressed to military precision, her signature red scarf knotted perfectly at her throat. She had been flying with Horizon for 20 years. In her mind, this wasn't just a job, it was her kingdom. And in Beatrice's kingdom, there were rules, unspoken rules about who belonged and who didn't. She adjusted her name tag, smiling tightly at a businessman in a charcoal suit. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Henderson. Right this way." Her smile was genuine for him. He looked the part. He looked like money. Then the mood in the cabin shifted. Beatrice's eyes narrowed as a young woman stepped onto the plane. She was young, perhaps early 20s, with voluminous, curly hair pulled back into a loose puff. She wore an oversized vintage grey hoodie, black leggings, and chunky sneakers. Over her shoulder was a battered canvas tote bag. She looked comfortable. To Beatrice, she looked like a vagrant who had wandered past the gate agents by mistake. Beatrice stepped sideways, effectively blocking the aisle to first class. "Excuse me, miss," Beatrice said, her voice dripping with a sickly sweet condescension. "Economy boarding is actually through the second door, or you can pass through here, but you'll need to keep moving. The back of the plane is quite a walk." The girl, Chloe, paused. She pulled large, noise-cancelling headphones down around her neck. "I'm sorry?" "Economy," Beatrice said, louder this time, performing for the other passengers settling into their pods. "Seats 30 through 50. You're holding up the line." Chloe blinked, unbothered. She reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out her boarding pass. "I'm not in economy. I'm in 1A. Beatrice froze. The audacity. She snatched the boarding pass from Chloe's hand, her manicured nails scraping against the girl's skin. She stared at the ticket. "Flight 492, seat 1A. C, Sterling, priority 1. It was a valid ticket, a full-fare, first-class ticket, but Beatrice's mind couldn't reconcile the data with the visual. Seat 1A was the most exclusive spot on the plane. It was usually reserved for diplomats, A-list celebrities, or corporate tycoons. It wasn't for girls in hoodies who looked like they should be taking the subway, not a transatlantic flight. "This," Beatrice scoffed, flicking the paper with her thumb, "is clearly a system error, or you picked up someone else's pass." "It's my pass," Chloe said, her voice calm but firm. "My name is on it. Can I sit down? I've had a long morning." Beatrice looked around. Mr. Henderson was watching. A lady in 2B was peering over her Vogue magazine. Beatrice felt her authority being challenged. If she let this slide, she lost control of her cabin. "I'm going to need to see some ID," Beatrice demanded, crossing her arms. "We've had issues with fraudulent upgrades lately." Chloe sighed, the first crack in her patience showing. "I showed my ID at the check-in counter, and at TSA, and at the gate. And now you're showing it to me," Beatrice snapped. Unless you want me to call security to escort you off for non-compliance?" Chloe stared at her for a long beat. The girl's eyes were dark and intelligent, analyzing Beatrice in a way that made the flight attendant uncomfortable. Slowly, Chloe reached into her tote bag and produced a passport. She held it up. Beatrice didn't even look at the name. She just looked at the picture, then back at the girl, trying to find a discrepancy. Finding none, she huffed. "Fine," Beatrice said, shoving the documents back at her. "But I'll be watching you. We have a strict dress code and conduct policy in first class. 1 disturbance, 1 sound, and you're moving to the back near the toilets. Understood?" Chloe didn't answer. She simply stepped around Beatrice, brushing past the stiff uniform, and dropped her canvas bag onto the plush leather of seat 1A. Beatrice watched her, her blood boiling. "She doesn't belong here," she thought, "and I'm going to prove it." 30 minutes passed. Boarding was nearly complete. The first-class cabin was full, a hush settling over the wealthy occupants as they accepted pre-flight champagne. Beatrice moved through the aisle with a bottle of Dom Perignon. She poured a glass for Mr. Henderson, offering a flirtatious wink. She poured for the lady in 2B. She skipped 1A entirely. Chloe didn't seem to notice, or she didn't care. She had her headphones back on and was typing away on a sleek tablet. Beatrice returned to the galley, where a junior flight attendant, a nervous young woman named Sarah, was prepping the hot towels. "Can you believe that?" Beatrice hissed, jerking her head toward the front of the cabin. "Believe what?" Sarah asked, glancing out. "The hoodlum in 1A. It's disgusting. Horizon Air used to mean something. Now they let anyone with a stolen credit card sit up front." "She seems quiet, Bea," Sarah said gently. "Maybe she's an influencer. They dress like that sometimes." "Influencer?" Beatrice laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "She looks like she deals drugs, and I'm not going to have her ruining the experience for our actual high-value clients." Beatrice marched back out into the aisle. She needed a reason. She needed a spark. As she passed 1A, she saw Chloe's canvas bag sticking out slightly from under the seat in front of her. It was perhaps an inch into the aisle space. "Excuse me," Beatrice shouted, causing Mr. Henderson to jump and spill a drop of champagne. Chloe pulled her headphones down again. "Yes?" "Your bag," Beatrice pointed accusingly. "It's a safety hazard. I told you, strict conduct. You are obstructing the evacuation path." Chloe looked at the bag. She nudged it forward with her sneaker. "It's under the seat." "It's too large," Beatrice lied. "It doesn't fit the regulations for cabin storage in this section. You need to check it." "It fits fine," Chloe said, her voice hardening. "It's a standard tote. It's smaller than that man's briefcase." She pointed to seat 1B. "Don't you dare compare yourself to Mr. Kensington," Beatrice snapped. "Give me the bag. I'm tagging it for the hold." "No," Chloe said. She placed a hand protectively over the canvas strap. "My laptop and medication are in here. I'm allowed to keep it." "You are refusing a crew member's instruction," Beatrice said, her voice rising to a theatrical volume. She wanted everyone to hear. She wanted the passengers to be on her side, the side of order and class. "That is a federal offense." "You are harassing me," Chloe countered, standing up. She was taller than Beatrice expected. "I have done nothing wrong. I showed you my ticket. I showed you my ID. I am sitting quietly. Why are you doing this?" "Because people like you are always trouble," Beatrice blurted out. The cabin went silent. The racial undertone hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Mr. Henderson in 2A cleared his throat. Stewardess? The young lady seems fine. Her bag is quite small." Beatrice whipped her head around, her face flushing red. "Sir, please do not interfere with flight safety protocols. I know how to spot a threat." She turned back to Chloe, her eyes gleaming with malice. "I smell it on you." Chloe frowned. "Smell what?" "Marijuana," Beatrice announced triumphantly. "I smell illegal narcotics. That's why you're so sluggish. You're under the influence. That is a direct violation of FAA regulations. I cannot allow an intoxicated passenger to fly." "I don't smoke," Chloe said, shocked. "I'm an athlete. I've never smoked in my life." "Liar," Beatrice hissed. She grabbed her radio from her belt. "Captain, this is the lead flight attendant. We have a situation in first class. I have a passenger who is non-compliant, aggressive, and appears to be under the influence of narcotics, requesting gate agents and police to remove her immediately." She clicked the radio off and smirked at Chloe. "Game over, honey. You thought you could scam your way to London? Now you're going to jail." Chloe didn't scream. She didn't cry. She looked at Beatrice with a strange expression. Not fear, but pity. "You really shouldn't have done that," Chloe said softly. "Save it for the cops," Beatrice spat. 2 minutes later, the bridge door reopened. 2 large officers from the Port Authority Police Department stepped onto the plane, their hands resting on their belts. Beatrice waved them over like she was summoning servants. "Officers, over here!" She pointed a shaking finger at Chloe. "She's the one. Intoxicated, aggressive, and refusing to check oversized luggage. Get her off my plane." The first officer, a man named Miller, who looked like he had seen it all, looked at Chloe. She was standing calmly, her hands visible. She didn't look drunk. She didn't smell like anything other than expensive vanilla lotion. "Ma'am," Officer Miller said to Chloe, "is this true?" "No," Chloe said. "She has been harassing me since I boarded. She didn't like my hoodie, so she decided I was a criminal." "I want her arrested," Beatrice shrieked. "She threatened me." Officer Miller looked at Beatrice. "Threatened you how?" She gave me a look, and she refused to hand over her bag. I am the authority on this aircraft until the doors close, and I say she is a threat to the safety of this flight." Beatrice was hyperventilating now, playing the victim perfectly, or so she thought. She looked at the other first-class passengers, expecting them to nod in agreement. But they were looking down, uncomfortable. "Miss," Officer Miller said to Chloe, "look, the airline has the right to refuse service. If the crew says you have to go, you have to go. We can sort out the refund inside." Chloe shook her head. "I'm not getting off this plane, and I'm not getting a refund." "Don't make this hard," the second officer warned, stepping closer. Chloe reached into her pocket. The officers flinched, hands moving to their tasers. "Easy," Chloe said, pulling out a slim black smartphone. "I'm just making a call." "No calls!" Beatrice lunged forward, trying to grab the phone. "Get off the phone!" Officer Miller blocked Beatrice with his arm. "Back up, Mum. Let her make the call. If she can get someone to pick her up, it saves us the paperwork." Chloe tapped the screen once. She put the phone to her ear. The cabin was deadly silent. Everyone could hear the ringtone. Ring. "Hello?" A deep, commanding voice answered on speaker. "Hi, Daddy," Chloe said, her eyes locked on Beatrice. "Chloe, are you in the air yet?" "I'm just finishing up in the lounge," the voice said. "No, I'm not in the air," Chloe said. "I'm being kicked off the plane." "What?" The voice dropped an octave. It went from warm to icy instantly. "Why?" "The flight attendant, a Miss Beatrice Halloway. She thinks I stole my ticket. She says I smell like drugs, and she called the police on me. They're standing right here." There was a silence on the other end of the line, a terrifying silence. "Stay right there, sweetie," the voice said. "Do not move. Hand the phone to the police officer." Chloe held the phone out to Officer Miller. Miller hesitated, then took it. "This is Officer Miller, Port Authority." He listened for 3 seconds. His face went pale. He straightened his spine, his eyes widening as he looked at the phone, then at Chloe. "Yes, sir. I understand, sir. No, sir, we didn't know. Yes. We will wait right here." Miller handed the phone back to Chloe with trembling hands. He stepped back, signaling his partner to stand down. "What is going on?" Beatrice demanded, sensing the shift in power but unable to comprehend it. "Why aren't you arresting her?" "We're waiting," Miller said, his voice tight. "Waiting for what?" Beatrice screeched. "For him," Chloe whispered, nodding toward the open cabin door. Heavy footsteps echoed on the jet bridge. Fast, angry footsteps. A shadow fell across the entryway. A man stepped onto the plane. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a bespoke Italian suit, with salt and pepper hair and a presence that sucked the oxygen out of the room. He wasn't just a passenger. He was power personified. Beatrice gasped. The blood drained from her face so fast she nearly fainted. She knew that face. It was on the orientation video she had watched 20 years ago. It was on the cover of the in-flight magazine, currently sitting in seat 2B. It was Richard Sterling, the CEO and majority shareholder of Horizon Air. And he looked absolutely furious. The silence in the first-class cabin was absolute. It was the kind of silence that usually precedes a natural disaster, the sucking back of the tide before the tsunami hits. Richard Sterling stood in the entryway, his frame filling the space. He didn't look like a man who had just run from a lounge. He looked like a man who had marched into battle. His eyes, a piercing shade of steel blue, swept across the scene. They took in the terrified flight attendant, the uncomfortable passengers, the 2 police officers with their hands hovering near their belts, and finally, his daughter. He didn't speak to Beatrice. He didn't acknowledge the police. He walked straight to seat 1A. "Chloe," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle, a stark contrast to the thundercloud expression on his face. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Did they touch you?" Chloe shook her head, though her hands were trembling slightly now that the adrenaline was fading. "No, but they were about to drag me off." Richard turned slowly. The movement was predatory. He faced Officer Miller. "I am Richard Sterling," he said, his voice low and vibrating with authority. "I am the CEO of Horizon Air. I am also the man who signs the contracts for the Port Authority's terminal leases at this airport. Now tell me why 2 armed officers are standing over my daughter." Officer Miller, who had faced down muggers and brawlers without flinching, looked like he wanted to vanish into the floor. He swallowed hard. "Mr. Sterling, sir, we received a Priority 1 distress call from the lead flight attendant. The report stated a passenger was intoxicated, combative, and in possession of narcotics. We were responding to a federal flight safety violation." Richard's eyes narrowed. He looked at Beatrice Halloway. Beatrice was pressed against the galley wall, her face a mask of crumbling plaster. She had been the queen of this cabin for 20 years. She had made grown men cry over lost luggage. But this was a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. "Mr. Sterling," Beatrice stammered, her voice cracking. She tried to smooth her skirt, a reflex of nervous vanity. I had no idea. She didn't say. She never mentioned. She didn't mention she was my daughter." Richard finished the sentence for her. He took a step closer to her, invading her personal space, just as she had done to Chloe. "And tell me, Ms. Halloway, I see your name tag, don't worry, I won't forget it." "Why should that matter?" "Sir." Beatrice blinked, sweat beading on her upper lip. "Why should it matter who her father is?" Richard asked, his voice rising in volume, projecting so every person in the cabin could hear. If she were a school teacher or a nurse or a student, would that make it acceptable for you to fabricate a crime against her? I didn't fabricate. Beatrice tried to rally. She had to. If she admitted to lying, she was finished. She grasped at the only straw she had left. She was aggressive, sir. She refused to comply with baggage regulations. She was surly. And I smelled marijuana. I have a nose for it. I was protecting the safety of this flight. Richard stared at her. You smelled marijuana? Yes. Beatrice nodded vigorously, gaining a sliver of confidence. Strong marijuana. She's probably carrying it in that bag. That's why she wouldn't check it. Richard turned back to Chloe. Give me the bag. Chloe handed the canvas tote to her father. Richard didn't open it. He held it out to Officer Miller. Officer, Richard said, search it, right now. Dump it out on the seat if you have to. Daddy, my laptop, Chloe started. It's okay, honey. We need to prove a point, Richard said, never taking his eyes off Beatrice. Officer Miller took the bag. He placed it on the empty seat 1B. With gloved hands, he opened it. Beatrice watched with bated breath, praying to every god she didn't believe in that there was a joint, a vape pen, anything. Miller pulled out items one by one. MacBook Pro, Miller announced. Textbooks, advanced organic chemistry, a bag of trail mix, a water bottle, a makeup bag. He unzipped the makeup bag and sniffed. Lotion. Vanilla. He reached into the bottom and pulled out a small orange prescription bottle. Beatrice's eyes lit up. Aha! She shrieked. Pills! Miller read the label. He looked at Beatrice with disgust. It's an inhaler for asthma, prescribed to Chloe Sterling. Miller turned the bag upside down. A gum wrapper fell out. Nothing else. No drugs, sir, Miller said, handing the bag back to Richard. No paraphernalia. No odor. Richard dropped the bag onto the seat. He turned back to Beatrice. The silence stretched out, heavy and suffocating. So, Richard said, his voice deadly calm. You lied to the police. You filed a false report. You profiled a paying customer based on her appearance. And when you didn't like her attitude, you tried to have her arrested. I made a mistake, Beatrice whispered, tears of terror welling up in her eyes. The smell. It must have been from the vents. I've been flying for 20 years, Mr. Sterling. I have a perfect record. I'm a senior attendant. A perfect record? Richard repeated. He pulled his own smartphone from his pocket. He tapped the screen a few times. Let's check that, shall we? Because my team just sent me your file while I was walking down the jet bridge. Beatrice froze. Beatrice Halloway, Richard read from the screen. 3 complaints in the last 6 months alone. All from passengers in economy. All regarding rude and dismissive behavior. But you're right, no formal reprimands. Do you know why? He looked up at her. Because you bully the junior staff into covering for you, and because you usually target people who don't have the resources to fight back. People you think won't file a lawsuit. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that felt like a knife. You thought she was nobody. That was your mistake. Not the bag. Not the hoodie. Your mistake was thinking that dignity is something you get to grant or revoke based on how much you think someone is worth. Beatrice was shaking violently now. Please, sir, I'm a single woman. I need this job. I'm close to my pension. Please. You should have thought about your pension before you called the police on a 20-year-old girl reading a chemistry textbook, Richard said coldly. He turned to the cockpit door. Is the captain in there? Yes, sir, Beatrice squeaked. Get him out here, Richard barked. Now, Captain Anderson emerged from the cockpit, looking like he was walking to his own execution. He was a good pilot, a veteran, but he was conflict-averse. He had heard the commotion, but had stayed behind the reinforced door, hoping the flight attendants would handle it. When he saw Richard Sterling standing in the galley, his face drained of colour. "Mr. Sterling," Anderson said, straightening his tie, "I wasn't aware you were joining us today." "I wasn't planning to," Richard said. "But apparently, my airline is in the habit of arresting my family members, so I had to make a detour." I don't understand." Anderson looked at Beatrice, then at Chloe. "Ms. Holloway invoked your authority to call the police," Richard said. "Did you authorize the call?" Anderson hesitated. He looked at Beatrice, who was pleading with him with her eyes. "Save me." "The lead attendant. She informed me we had a level 2 threat," Anderson said carefully. "Narcotics and aggression. Standard protocol is to trust the cabin crew's assessment and contact ground support." "So you didn't come out to verify?" Richard asked. "We are in pre-flight checks, sir. I trusted her judgment." "Her judgment," Richard scoffed. "Her judgment just cost this airline a potential PR disaster that would have wiped 10% off our stock value if I hadn't walked through that door." Richard turned to the rest of the cabin. The other passengers in first class had been watching the drama unfold with wide eyes. Some had put down their drinks. "I need witnesses," Richard announced to the room. "I want to know exactly what happened before I walked in. Ms. Holloway claims my daughter was aggressive and disruptive. Is there anyone here who can corroborate that?" Beatrice looked at the passengers. She had served some of them before. She had flirted with Mr. Henderson. Surely the Brotherhood of the first-class cabin would protect her. They were her people. They didn't want a girl in a hoodie there either. "Mr. Henderson," Beatrice said, her voice shaking. "You saw it. You saw her block the aisle. You saw the bag." Mr. Henderson, the businessman in the charcoal suit, looked at Beatrice. Then he looked at Richard Sterling. He was a businessman too. He knew which way the wind was blowing. But more than that, he looked at Chloe, who was just a young girl sitting alone, clutching her chemistry book. He stood up. "Actually," Henderson said, buttoning his jacket. "That's not what I saw." Beatrice gasped. "What?" "I saw this young lady board politely," Henderson said clearly, addressing Richard. "I saw your employee block her path physically. I heard your employee make disparaging remarks about her ticket and her clothing, and when the young lady sat down, she was perfectly quiet." "He's lying!" Beatrice screeched. "He's trying to suck up to the boss." "I have no need to suck up to anyone," Henderson said icily. "And I wasn't the only one." The woman in 2B, the one with the Vogue magazine, lowered her reading glasses. "She's right, Mr. Sterling. It was appalling. The stewardess was picking a fight. The girl just wanted to put her headphones on. Frankly, it was racist." The word hung in the air. Racist. Beatrice recoiled as if slapped. "I am not. How dare you?" "I recorded it," a voice said from the third row. Everyone turned. A young man, maybe 30, in a tech bro hoodie of his own, held up an iPhone. "I started filming when she started yelling about the bag," the man said. "I thought it was going to be a Karen video for TikTok. I got the whole thing. The girl was chill. The flight attendant was manic." Richard held out his hand. "Can I see that?" The young man walked up and handed the phone to Richard. Richard pressed play. The video was clear. The audio was crisp. "Because people like you are always trouble," Beatrice's voice, tinny but distinct on the recording. "I smell it on you. Marijuana." "Game over, honey." Richard watched it. His jaw tightened. He watched the part where Chloe calmly asked to be left alone, and Beatrice screamed for the captain. Richard handed the phone back. "Email that to me. Directly. I'll give you the address." He turned to Beatrice. She was trembling so hard her teeth were chattering. The evidence was irrefutable. The witnesses had turned. The video existed. "Officer Miller?" Richard said. "Yes, sir." "You were called here to remove a criminal," Richard said. "I believe you have one, but it's not the passenger in 1A. Beatrice's eyes bulged. No, you can't." "Filing a false police report is a crime in the state of New York," Richard said. "Interfering with a flight crew is a federal offense, but using your position as a flight crew member to harass a passenger and fabricate federal charges? I imagine the FAA and the district attorney will have a field day with that." "Mr. Sterling, please!" Beatrice grabbed his arm. He shook her off as if she were a spider. "I've given 20 years. You can't arrest me. I'm the victim here. She provoked me." "You are not the victim," Richard said, his voice dropping to a terrifying absolute. "You are a liability, and as of this moment, you are fired, effective immediately. You are no longer an employee of Horizon Air. You are trespassing on my aircraft." He nodded to Officer Miller. "Officer, please remove this woman from the plane. If she resists, I expect you to use the same protocols you were planning to use on my daughter." Officer Miller stepped forward, his face grim. He pulled his handcuffs from his belt. "Beatrice Halloway," Miller said. "Turn around and place your hands behind your back." "No! No!" Beatrice screamed. She backed away, knocking into the drink cart. "Captain! Help me!" Captain Anderson looked at the floor, studying his shoes. He said nothing. Miller grabbed Beatrice's wrist. She shrieked, a high-pitched, wailing sound that echoed through the cabin. The second officer grabbed her other arm. "You're making a mistake!" Beatrice yelled as they clicked the cuffs onto her wrists. The cold steel snapped shut, locking her career and her freedom away. "I'm Beatrice Halloway. I run this cabin. You can't do this!" "It's done," Richard said. They dragged her toward the door. As she passed Chloe, Beatrice lunged, trying to spit at her, but the officers yanked her back. "I hate you!" Beatrice screamed at the girl in the hoodie. "You ruined my life!" Chloe looked at her, her expression sad and tired. "You ruined your own life," she said softly. "I just wanted to go to London." The officers hauled Beatrice onto the jet bridge. Her screams faded as they dragged her up the ramp toward the terminal, where a crowd of onlookers and cell phones were waiting to record her walk of shame. Richard let out a long breath. He adjusted his suit jacket. The cabin was silent again, but the tension had broken. He turned to the junior flight attendant, Sarah, who was cowering in the galley, holding a tray of hot towels like a shield. "You," Richard said. Sarah jumped. "Yes. Yes, sir?" "Did you know she was lying?" Richard asked. Sarah's lip quivered. I told her, sir. I told her the passenger looked fine. I told her to stop, but she wouldn't listen. She was my boss. I was scared of her." Richard studied her face. He saw the genuine fear there. He nodded. "Okay," Richard said. "What's your name?" "Sarah, sir." "Well, Sarah," Richard said, looking around the cabin. "It seems we are down a lead flight attendant. Do you think you can handle the service for first class today?" Sarah's eyes went wide. "Me? Lead?" "Consider it a field promotion," Richard said. "Don't make me regret it." "I won't, sir. Thank you, sir." Sarah beamed, the color returning to her face. Richard turned to Captain Anderson. "Captain, I apologize for the delay. You have a new manifest to file. Remove Ms. Halloway. Keep Ms. Sterling in 1A. "Yes, Mr. Sterling. Right away," Anderson said, scuttling back into the cockpit to do damage control. Richard finally sat down on the ottoman of Chloe's seat. He took her hands in his. "Are you sure you're okay to fly, sweetheart?" he asked. "We can get off. Take the jet tomorrow." Chloe looked at her dad. She squeezed his hand. "I'm okay, Dad, honestly. I just want to get to school. I have exams next week. You're tougher than I am. Richard smiled weakly. I would have lost my mind. You kind of did. Chloe grinned. You fired her in front of everyone. She deserved it, Richard said darkly. I'll make sure the charges stick too. No one treats people like that on my airline. Not my daughter. Not anyone. He kissed her forehead. I have to go handle the police report and deal with the press that's probably gathering outside. Call me when you land. I will. Richard stood up. He nodded to Mr. Henderson and the other passengers. Ladies and gentlemen, drinks are on the house for the duration of the flight. Thank you for your patience. And thank you, he looked at Henderson and the tech guy, for standing up for the truth. Richard Sterling walked off the plane. The door closed behind him. Chloe let out a sigh and leaned back into the soft leather of seat 1A. Sarah, the new lead flight attendant, appeared instantly with a fresh glass of orange juice and a warm smile. For you, Ms. Sterling, Sarah said. Can I get you anything else? A blanket? Some snacks? Chloe smiled back. Just the juice is fine. Thank you, Sarah. As the plane pushed back from the gate, Chloe looked out the window. She saw a police cruiser flashing its lights on the tarmac below. She saw a woman in a Horizon Air uniform being shoved into the back seat. Karma had landed. But the story wasn't over yet. Because when a video like that goes viral, it doesn't just end with an arrest. It ends with the world weighing in. And Beatrice Halloway was about to become the most hated woman in America, while Chloe Sterling was cruising at 35,000 feet, sipping orange juice and reviewing the carbon structures of alkenes. The world below was catching fire. The passenger in seat 3A, a tech entrepreneur named Leo, hadn't waited to land to upload the video. He had used the plane's high-speed Wi-Fi to post the clip to Twitter, X, and TikTok before the fasten seatbelt sign even turned off. He captioned it simply, "Power-tripping flight attendant calls cops on a black girl for smelling like drugs." Turns out the girl is the CEO's daughter. Watch the instant regret. War Horizon Air, ändrat karma unkrat sifafo. By the time Beatrice Halloway was being processed at the Port Authority police station in Queens, the video had 2.4 million views. By the time her mugshot was taken, mascara smeared under her eyes, her signature red scarf confiscated as a choking hazard, it had hit 10 million. Beatrice sat in a holding cell that smelled of bleach and despair. It was a far cry from the lavender-scented air of the first-class cabin. She was still in a state of indignant shock. She tapped her foot against the concrete floor, waiting for her union representative. "They can't do this," she muttered to the empty room. "I have seniority, I have rights. It was a safety call." Finally, the heavy metal door buzzed open. Gary, the senior rep for the flight attendants union, walked in. Gary was usually a bulldog for his people. He had saved flight attendants who had shown up hungover or who had cursed at passengers. Beatrice smiled, relieved. "Gary," she stood up, smoothing her wrinkled uniform. "Thank God. Get me out of here. This is a wrongful termination suit waiting to happen. Richard Sterling humiliated me. I want to sue for emotional distress." Gary didn't sit down. He didn't open his briefcase. He just looked at her with a mix of pity and disgust. "There won't be a suit, Beatrice," Gary said flatly. "What?" Beatrice blinked. "Of course there will be. He fired me without a tribunal. That's against the collective bargaining agreement." Gary pulled out his phone and turned the screen toward her. It was the video. The volume was up. Beatrice watched herself scream, saw her own face twisted in a mask of hate as she lunged at Chloe. She heard the distinct, tinny sound of her own voice lying to the police. The union board just watched this, Gary said. We held an emergency vote 10 minutes ago. And we are revoking your membership, effective immediately, Gary said, putting the phone away. We don't defend this, Beatrice. You fabricated a federal crime against a passenger based on racial profiling. You violated the core code of conduct, and you did it to the owner's daughter. So you're abandoning me? Beatrice shrieked, her voice echoing off the concrete walls. I paid my dues for 20 years. We're not abandoning you, Gary said, turning to the door. We're cutting out a cancer. You're on your own, Bea. Horizon Air has already issued a statement. They're cooperating fully with the district attorney. They're pushing for maximum charges. Gary, she screamed as the door closed. Gary, come back. But he was gone. Meanwhile, in the Horizon Air boardroom in Manhattan, Richard Sterling was conducting a masterclass in crisis management. He stood at the head of a long mahogany table, flanked by his PR team and legal counsel. The stock is down 2% in pre-market, the CFO noted nervously. Investors are worried about a discrimination class action. Let it drop, Richard said calmly. It'll bounce back when they see how we handle this. He looked at the draft of the press release on the screen. Horizon Air has zero tolerance for discrimination. We apologize to the passenger. No, Richard said, grabbing a red marker. He crossed out the generic corporate speak. Make it personal. Write this. I, Richard Sterling, failed to protect a passenger today. That passenger happened to be my daughter, but the pain of discrimination is felt by thousands who don't have a direct line to the CEO. Today, we are launching an independent review of all passenger complaints filed by Beatrice Halloway over the last decade. We will find every person she wronged, and we will make it right. Sir, the general counsel, a sharp woman named Linda, warned. That opens us up to massive liability. If we admit she has a history... We already have liability, Linda, Richard snapped. The video is out. The only way we survive this is by burning the corruption to the ground ourselves. Publish it. When Chloe landed at Heathrow 7 hours later, she turned on her phone. It nearly melted from the notifications. Text messages from friends, classmates, and cousins. Instagram DMs from strangers calling her a hero. She walked out of the jet bridge, exhausted. 2 Horizon Air ground staff were waiting for her, holding a sign with her name. They looked terrified, treating her like fragile porcelain. Ms. Sterling. One of them bowed slightly. Your father arranged a private car. He didn't want you walking through the terminal. The paparazzi are there. Paparazzi? Chloe rubbed her eyes. For me? The video is the #1 trending topic in the world, miss. They're calling you the first-class Rose. Because you stayed calm. Chloe sighed. She pulled her hoodie up. Just get me to the dorms, please. I really need to study for OChem. She didn't want fame. She didn't want viral stardom. She just wanted the grade she had worked for. But as the black Mercedes whisked her away from Heathrow, she looked at the news feed on her phone. Breaking. NYC District Attorney announces charges against Air Karen. Chloe shut off her phone. She didn't feel happy. She just felt a profound sense of exhaustion that people like Beatrice Halloway existed at all. 3 weeks later, the world had moved on to the next scandal, but Beatrice Halloway's life had come to a grinding, screeching halt. She was out on bail, staying in her Queens apartment, but it felt like a prison. The internet sleuths, the digital detectives on Reddit and TikTok, had doxed her within hours of the incident. Her address was posted online. Every morning, she woke up to hate mail taped to her door. Someone had spray-painted racist in bright red letters across the hood of her Honda Civic. She had lost her job. She had lost her pension. She had lost her health insurance. Beatrice sat on her beige sofa, surrounded by empty wine bottles and takeout containers. The blinds were drawn. The TV was blaring. She was watching The Daily Truth with Trent, a controversial talk show known for giving a platform to cancelled individuals. It was her last Hail Mary. No lawyer would take her case for free, and she couldn't afford the retainers the big firms demanded. Her only chance was to win back public sympathy, to start a GoFundMe for her legal defense. On the screen, the host, Trent Miller, a man with bleached teeth and a fake tan, looked into the camera. "Tonight," Trent said in his dramatic baritone, "we have an exclusive. The flight attendant demonized by the woke mob. Was she a racist monster? Or was she a woman doing her job, crushed by a billionaire CEO protecting his spoiled daughter?" Beatrice Halloway speaks out. Beatrice took a swig of cheap Chardonnay. "That's right," she muttered. "Tell them, Trent." The segment cut to the pre-recorded interview she had done yesterday. Beatrice had dressed in a soft pink cardigan, worn a cross necklace, and cried on cue. "I was just scared," TV Beatrice sobbed on screen. The bag looked suspicious. In this post-9/11 world, we are trained to be vigilant. I didn't see color. I saw a security threat. And Mr. Sterling, he didn't even let me explain. He just destroyed me to look good for the cameras. It was a good performance. Beatrice felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this would turn the tide. Maybe the conservative pundits would pick this up as a workers' rights issue. Then the segment ended, and the camera cut back to Trent live in the studio. He wasn't smiling anymore. He was holding a blue folder. "Powerful words," Trent said. "However, just before we went to air, my production team received a package from the legal department of Horizon Air. They claim that in the interest of radical transparency, they wanted to provide context to Ms. Halloway's claims of a spotless record." Beatrice froze. Her wine glass halted halfway to her mouth. "I'm looking at these documents," Trent said, flipping the page. "And, wow. Okay. Folks, this is public record now." He held up a sheet. Incident report, March 2018. Beatrice Halloway calls airport security on a Sikh doctor because his turban looked too large. The doctor was a heart surgeon flying to a conference. No contraband found. Beatrice's heart hammered against her ribs. Incident report, July 2021, Trent continued, his voice losing its sympathetic tone. Beatrice Halloway moves a Hispanic family from Economy Plus to the back row to make room for a pilot commuting, despite the family having paid full price. The pilot was her boyfriend. Trent looked up at the camera. There are 40 pages of this. 40 pages of bullying, profiling, and petty tyranny. He tossed the folder onto his desk. "We invited Miss Halloway here because we believe in two sides to every story. But it looks like the only side here is that of a woman who finally bullied the wrong person. We will be donating the ad revenue from this segment to the Enolelapi Legal Defense Fund. Good night." The screen faded to black. Beatrice stared at the TV. Her mouth hung open. The silence in the apartment was deafening. Her phone started ringing. She grabbed it, hoping it was a supporter. It was her landlord, Mr. Russo. "Beatrice?" His gruff voice came through. "Mr. Russo, listen. That interview, it was edited wrong." "I don't care about the interview," Russo said. "I care about the crowd of people standing outside my building, throwing eggs at your windows. I have other tenants, Beatrice. Families. I can't have this circus." "You can't kick me out," Beatrice cried. "I have a lease." "Read the morality clause in your contract," Russo said. "Criminal activity on the premises or bringing disrepute to the property. You're being charged with filing a false police report. That's a Class A misdemeanor in New York, punishable by up to a year in jail. The cops were at my door asking about you. So, "You have 30 days, Russo said. "Pack your bags, and do me a favor? Leave under cover of darkness. I don't want the news vans blocking the driveway again." The line went dead. Beatrice dropped the phone. It clattered to the floor. She looked around her apartment. The things she had bought with her Horizon Air salary, the knickknacks from her travels. It was all dissolving. She had wanted to humiliate a girl in a hoodie. She had wanted to feel powerful for 5 minutes. And for that 5 minutes of power, she had traded the rest of her life. The next morning, Beatrice had to go to court for her arraignment. She couldn't afford a car service, and her Honda had 4 slashed tires. She had to take the subway. She pulled a hat low over her eyes and wore a large pair of sunglasses, trying to hide. She huddled in the corner of the train car, clutching her purse. Across from her, 2 teenage girls were watching a video on a phone. They were laughing. "Look at her face," one girl said. "When the dad walks in, priceless." "She's so evil," the other girl said. "I hope she goes to jail forever." Beatrice shrank back against the cold metal seat. She recognized the audio. It was the video. It was everywhere. It was inescapable. She closed her eyes, wishing she could simply disappear, wishing she could rewind time to the moment she saw the girl in seat 1A and just kept walking. But the train rattled on, carrying her relentlessly toward the courthouse, toward the judge, and toward a reckoning that was long overdue. As she stepped off the train at the court station, a flash bulb popped. Then another. The press was waiting. "Beatrice! Beatrice!" a reporter yelled, shoving a microphone in her face. "How does it feel to be the most hated woman in the sky?" Beatrice Halloway lowered her head and wept, but nobody was handing her a tissue this time. 6 months later, the spring semester at Columbia University was in full bloom. The campus was alive with students soaking up the sun on the lawns, textbooks open but largely ignored. Chloe Sterling sat on a bench near the library, a matcha latte in her hand. She looked different. The weight of the incident had lifted, replaced by a quiet confidence. She was no longer just the first-class Rose from the viral video. She was Chloe, a top-tier chemistry student who had just aced her finals. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from her dad. "Meeting went well. Board approved the new scholarship fund. Proud of you." Chloe smiled. In the wake of the scandal, Richard Sterling hadn't just fired Beatrice. He had overhauled the entire corporate culture of Horizon Air. He had implemented mandatory, rigorous bias training for all staff, training that was now the industry gold standard. But Chloe had pushed for more. She had convinced him to start the Horizon Scholars Program, a full-ride scholarship for underrepresented students in aviation and STEM fields. She typed back, "Thanks, Dad. Dinner Sunday." As she put her phone away, a shadow fell over her. She looked up to see a young woman standing there, looking nervous. "Hi," the girl said. "Are you Chloe Sterling?" Chloe braced herself. Even months later, people sometimes stopped her. "Yes." The girl's face broke into a relieved smile. "I'm Maya. I wanted to say thank you. I got the email yesterday. I'm one of the first Horizon scholars. I'm going to flight school because of you." Chloe's heart swelled. The ugliness of that day on the tarmac, the humiliation, the fear, the anger, it had all been compost for this moment. "That's amazing, Maya," Chloe said, patting the spot next to her on the bench. "Sit down. Tell me everything." While Chloe was building a future, Beatrice Halloway was sifting through the wreckage of her past. The plea deal had been harsh, but necessary. To avoid jail time, Beatrice had pleaded guilty to filing a false instrument and harassment. Her sentence, 3 years of probation, 500 hours of community service, and mandatory anger management counseling. But the real punishment wasn't the courts. It was life's. Beatrice was currently working the night shift at a 24-hour fulfillment warehouse in New Jersey. It was the only place that would hire her after a background check. The work was grueling. She spent 8 hours a day on her feet, scanning packages, lifting heavy boxes, and being barked at by a supervisor who was half her age. Her feet ached constantly. Her back spasmed. The air in the warehouse was stale and dusty, nothing like the filtered, climate-controlled air of a Boeing 787. It was 3 a.m. on a Tuesday. Beatrice was on her break, sitting on a plastic crate in the loading dock, eating a cold sandwich. She watched a plane soar overhead, its blinking lights cutting through the dark sky. It was a Horizon Air jet, descending toward Newark. She watched it until it disappeared behind the skyline. Tears pricked her eyes, but she wiped them away quickly. There was no one here to care, no junior attendants to bully, no captive audience in seat 2B. Her supervisor stuck his head out the door. "Holloway, break's over. Line 4 is backed up. Move it." "Coming," Beatrice said, her voice raspy. She stood up, her knees popping. She threw her sandwich wrapper in the trash and walked back inside, under the harsh fluorescent lights. She was just a number now, just a cog in a machine. She had learned the hardest lesson of all. Status is fragile. Kindness is free. And when you try to stand on someone's neck to make yourself feel tall, you better make sure they aren't the one holding the ladder. Beatrice Holloway got back to work, scanning boxes for people who were going places she would never go again. And that is the story of how one woman's prejudice collided with the wrong passenger. Beatrice Holloway thought her uniform gave her the right to judge Chloe Sterling based on a hoodie and a stereotype. She thought she was protecting her kingdom in first class. But in the end, she didn't just lose her job. She lost her reputation, her career, and her freedom. It's a powerful reminder that we never truly know who we are dealing with. The quiet girl in the hoodie might be the CEO's daughter, or she might just be a human being deserving of respect. Either way, treating people with dignity shouldn't be a strategy. It should be a default setting. Beatrice learned that lesson too late, alone in a warehouse, watching the planes she used to command fly on without her. I hope you enjoyed this story of instant karma. If you felt that justice was served, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow and reach more people. What would you have done if you were in Chloe's shoes? Would you have stayed that calm? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want more stories like this, drama, twists, and satisfying revenge, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.